Nina, thank you. That was wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my great honor to introduce the next person. He has been our company's attorney forever. He would like to share his expertise and give us guidance. I would like to welcome Mr. Scott Gale.
Good morning, afternoon. It's always a pleasure to come here and speak to the Panafric community. I've been many years to this luncheon and always enjoy it. Jay, thanks for having me. Jay asked me to speak briefly about 212 degrees, the theme for today, Doscientos dos grados. And I find it a wonderful metaphor for how we can achieve better things in our lives. As an attorney, I often have occasions where my clients need to make that extra effort, that extra degree to solve a problem. Or very often, when they find themselves in a situation where extra effort is needed to survive a crisis. As many of our businesses have been in trouble for the past few years, it takes that extra degree to get out of the hole. I drink a lot of tea. I have a cold, in case you can't tell. And I was thinking about today's speech, and I thought about the tea kettle. Now, the plaque says you're going to power a train with this, but steam also powers a small little tea kettle. Una tetera. Did I say that right? And water and heat are the ingredients of this thing. If you get to 212 degrees with a tea kettle, it will boil and whistle if it has that little whistle on it. Believe me, I need the whistle. And the whistle will wake you up, and it will get you going, and it will make you take an action. It doesn't matter whether you turn the heat up or someone else turned the heat up on the stove. That person might be a friend or a colleague, encouraging you to get going and giving you that warning whistle, or it could be a boss or a relative or even an enemy that has presented you with a challenge that you need to solve. When you hear that call to action, when that whistle blows, it makes you jump up and deal with the problem. 100 years ago in this country, mills and factories would start the workday by blowing the steam whistle. Everybody would go to the work, and when the shift was over, it would blow again. But on other occasions, they would use that whistle as a call to arms, to wake up the entire town, to come down to the city hall or the factory and find out what the emergency was. Perhaps we should use the kettle whistle as a metaphor for waking us up and doing better things. When your water boils, you can make food, you can make a cup of tea, you can nourish and relax. But ignoring that kettle will boil down the water, and that kettle will melt on the stove. And you have a disaster if you ignore the problem. So reaching 2212 is a critical time. It's a time for action and decision. It doesn't matter whether you started the problem or the heat or someone else did. I had an experience last year, let me share with you. It was a 212 experience. I didn't know it then, I know it now. I serve as a volunteer on a board of a foundation called the Governor's School Foundation, and it raises money to support the Governor's School of North Carolina, which is held at Salem College and Meredith College every summer for 600 talented and gifted students in the arts and the sciences that are high school seniors in North Carolina. And it's been free for 50 years, except for a small tuition. I went in 1968, and it changed my life back then, and I still have friends from that era. So I serve on this board, and we raised about $20,000 a year, and we send it as supplemental funds for the campuses because the state pays for the campus. It's $800,000 a year to send 600 of our top students there and give them a head start for college. We were sitting around last June and ready to give out our $20,000, and word came that the legislature had abolished all funding for Governor's School, along with $414 million in cuts to higher education in North Carolina. We were shocked. 13 volunteers sitting around at a board. Many of you have found yourselves on boards such as that. And we realized that someone had turned the heat up on the kettle, but there was no water in the kettle. And if we didn't do something, the kettle would melt and the school would no longer exist. A great institution for this state would have died. The only way we could keep the school open was to decide whether we wanted to volunteer to raise enough money to pay for the school for 1 year with private funding, and then convince the legislature to reverse itself and refund the school for the future. It was almost an impossible task, but the 13 people sitting there in that room that day decided that they would give that extra effort, that they would give that extra 1 degree, and we decided to save the school or die trying. So we poured lots of water into that kettle, and the whistle went off. And we found 6,000 old addresses and old emails of the 32,000 people that had been to Governor's School in 50 years, and we contacted them. And we used that blowing whistle as an SOS, save our school, a warning cry. We held bake sales, we held parties, we held meetings with businesses and banks and foundations, and we applied for grants. We set up a website, we contacted everybody. Very simple, this is a simple thing, we got to save the school. Students gave $10, parents gave $100. One lady who went to Governor's School in 1972, lives in Paris, sent $10,000. People really believed in this. The money started coming in, and our board met every week for a year. Have you ever been on a board that met that much? We met every Wednesday night for a year. Eventually we raised over $700,000, and we opened the school on time this summer for 600 kids. We went to Raleigh, and we convinced the legislature to reverse its position, and I'm happy to say that there's now an $800,000 recurring appropriation in the budget again for Governor's School, and we accomplished our goal. It was a miracle, really, but the school, the alumni, and the state is all stronger for that effort. Now, I'm not here to pat myself on the back, but simply to tell you that we did not look for that opportunity. It was foisted upon us. And maybe that's going to happen to you in your everyday work life. It doesn't have to be a big event like raising $1 million. It may be dealing with that guest in the hotel who the first time you see him, he is already mad. He's already boiling. His teapot is ready to melt on the stove. And it may be your opportunity to pour some water into that pot, make him some tea, and calm him down rather than let him melt. That may be the way that you use 212 degrees. It may be that you're having a bad day at work, you're in a bad mood, and you either have the choice of adding some water to your heat and making some tea and calming down and dealing with your coworkers, or letting it harm your relationships with your family and friends. The choice is yours every day. La elección es tuya todos los días. Gracias. Thank you very much. Jay, thanks for having me.
Thank you, Mr. Gale. That was very informative and interesting. Our next guest is our guest of honor. Today, he is an exceptional man, and we are greatly appreciative that he took the time to come and speak with us today. He is a very well-known CPA firm in town, Dixon and Hughes. He is with us for the past 15 years or more. He has 12 years experience working in the areas of corporate, partnership, and individual tax preparation. His prior experience includes receiving his accreditation in business valuation, which provides him with a comprehensive business perspective and the ability to identify planning opportunities. Please all welcome our consultant, our CPA, Kevin Herron.
Appreciate that. Can I get that set up? Because I'm going to scroll through some notes if I can. There we go. guess I'll just stand here and not touch anything. I want to thank Jay for having me today. This is my first time, despite working with Jay for a long time, this is my first time actually being involved in one of these ceremonies. And I just have to say that the crowd is not nearly as scary looking as Jay made you guys out. And I also want Scott. I've known Scott as well for quite a long time, and I actually work with his wife. So we've had a lot of time to trade stories, and it's always good to see Scott. And Scott, I appreciate your comments on the 212. Having said that, what I want to talk about today is basically, we've talked about 212, and I think everybody's kind of giving you some great examples and stuff like that, but I wanted to kind of bring it home a little bit more for everybody, hopefully give you some real life experiences. Now, I know you're probably sitting out there right now saying to yourself, this guy's a tax accountant. I work in the hotel industry. What in the world is this guy going to teach me today? And my answer on that is I'm not going to teach you a thing. And so you're like, oh, great, now he's going to stand up here for 20 minutes and not teach me a thing. But the idea is that you guys are in the client service business, and I'm in the client service business. You look at me and you go, that guy prepares my tax return, but you don't realize that really what I'm doing is I'm dealing with emotions. I mean, is there anybody in here that likes to pay taxes? I don't see many hands. Okay, so what I learned very, very quickly, the first time I had to tell one of my clients, a taxpayer, that it was April 15th, I finished his tax return on April 14th at midnight, and I had the great privilege to tell him that he owed $500,000. And when you get in that situation, you learn very, very quickly how to develop a bedside manner. And through the years, there's a couple things I always say. Don't shoot the messenger, because that messenger is always me. And also, that paying taxes is a good thing. And I know you guys are looking at me like I'm crazy for saying that. But if you're paying taxes, what does that mean?
You're making money.
You're making money. And that's the hardest thing to convey, especially when that person's already spent that money that they made. But hopefully that's not the case. But back to the point, I'm in that client service business. And we hold hands with these clients. And I always know with these clients that the more they tell me about their personal life, the more that I'm considered their trusted advisor. When I signed up for this thing, I thought, well, I'm going to be an accountant, and I'm going to sit behind my computer all day, and I'm going to crank out these numbers, and I'm going to solve problems. And I do that, and that's great. But I didn't realize that I was going to be a part-time psychologist, just a family friend. When people trust you with their money, and I don't hold their money, but we talk about their money, they'll trust you with just about anything. And so, but the key here is to develop those skills as a trusted advisor so that when the time comes, you're ready. And the other thing that I've noticed too is that the better job I do at being that trusted advisor, and when I'm dealing with these numbers all the time, I'm gonna make some mistakes. I mean, I'm not perfect. I don't think anybody in here is perfect. But I'm gonna make some mistakes. And when I make those mistakes, that client is much more likely to stay with me after I've made a mistake if I've worked very, very hard to build that relationship. And I think the same principle holds true with you guys. If you're doing everything you can at the personal service side, then what's going to happen is they're going to stay with you. I mean, if they rent a room and the hotel room air conditioner breaks, something that's out of your control. But if you react quickly enough and you show sincerity in what you do, you may not have lost that client. And so I think a lot of the same principles apply with what I do versus what you guys do. And aside from that, the other thing that I do is I also stay in hotels. And so what I can do when I travel, especially the fact that I have hotel clients, is I can look at these hotels and now look at them with a much different eye to kind of see, hey, what do these guys do? What do these guys do? What's happening here? And one of the first things that I always do is I always look at a client, and when I stay at a hotel and I say, okay, where are the housekeepers? And so I look to see the housekeepers. And I always initiate conversation with the housekeepers. And you know why I do that? Because I want to see how they respond. If the housekeepers are friendly, if they try to help me, then I know I can take that as a sign that things are good here, that they care. If the housekeeper looks at me and they say, you know what, I really don't want to talk to this guy. I wish he'd just get out of his room so I can hurry up and clean this room and go about my business because I got things to do, I got people to see, I got a family to raise. Then I know that person's probably cutting corners on my room. Whereas and it may be the case with the person that's very nice to me too, but at least the perception to me is that that worker wants to be there, that that worker wants to make sure I have a good experience. And so, I know that if you work at the front desk at a hotel, you're the person that has been drilled in by the owner, the manager, whoever, that you better be nice, the client is always right, so they get that. But I don't know how many hotels actually take the time to train all the ancillary folks that also serve a purpose, because you guys all have a piece of that client experience. I mean, some way, either directly or indirectly, you may be a direct touch to that client, or you may be a secondary touch. But either way, you're either affecting that client directly or that customer, or you're affecting someone else within this organization who is directly affecting that client experience. So just in case some of you folks are backroom folks, you still are having an impact on client experiences. So you can't let that sort of slip away from your train of thought. You always need to be cognizant of that and approach each day like that. And what I've tried to do is I've tried to put together a list of about 20 different things, and I'll kind of run through some of these because I want to share sort of some ideas. And I don't know what it is about accountants, but whether it's 212 or whether it's the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People or From Good to Great or any of those things, I think they look at our profession as needing more help in that area than anywhere else, because I'll tell you what, we get more of these seminars, and they're great. And a lot of it, what you'll see when you go to these things or when you're involved in these type of activities is there's a lot of common themes. And that's what I'm talking about with common themes, and the fact that I'm not going to teach anything, because everything that I'm going to talk about is common sense. And it's just a matter of kind of refreshing what you do and who you are and how you go about doing things that's going to change the way that you do your job, the success you have within your job, and enhancing the overall client experience that your customers have. So we talked about the different ways about the hotel customer. I have to tell you this, Scott's old fashioned, he's using the old paper, pencil, but I've got my notes on the iPad, and what's great about that is they always tell you when you're standing in front of folks and you're doing a presentation, I'm supposed to look out and just assume that you guys are naked. Well, I really can't do that, but if I click over on here, I can do that very quickly, so, kidding. But anyway, the other thing too is what you got to get used to is, when you're that person that has that direct contact, and the client's always right, the client's always, the answer's always yes. Well, does your body language, is it congruent with what you're saying verbally? Because I'll tell you what, as a customer, I may not be the sharpest guy, but I can tell when somebody doesn't want to help me and when somebody does. So I think what we have to do is we have to get in that mindset where as a server of a customer, we're going to be in a position where our body language speaks miles about what we're trying to do. I mean, they can tell we're here to serve, we're here to help. And the best thing that I get out of hotel employees is that if I ask somebody a question, let's say I ask a housekeeper, and I don't mean to keep picking on housekeepers, but let's say I ask a housekeeper a question that I absolutely know has nothing to do with her job. Because isn't that sort of a test to see how they respond? Isn't that sort of a test to say, is she going to help me? Or, because what's the easiest thing to do? The easiest thing for her to do is say, I don't know, or call front desk. I mean, how easy is that? And she may not know the answer, but usually in a question like that, you can tell whether or not she wants to help or whether she doesn't want to help. And so I think it's a great indication overall in terms of the willingness and the team effort that you have within an organization. I do a lot of physician practice work. It's another niche clientele that I deal with. And people say, well, Kevin, you do all these physicians. How do you pick your doctor? And I said, well, that's an easy question. He said, you can't use all the doctors that you work with, so how do you do that? And I said, well, it's real easy. I said, I normally take a look at their retirement plan. And when you set up a retirement plan, you can set it up multiple ways. And you guys all deal with doctors, so you know what I'm talking about. And what I found with doctors is there's two kinds. There's the kind that bend over backwards for you, they're the nicest guys in the world. And then there's the other set, which tend to think they know it all, and they're really in it for the money. Well, when I look at their retirement plan, one of the things that I always